Welcome to the College Football Preview Show, sponsored by Yolked. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and we are back with you again this season, and I'm joined by my partner, the great Ryan Barry, who, of course, covers UMass for us and other college football games as well. He is our lead college football writer. Ryan, great to see you, man. Excited to be back for another season?
Oh, I can't wait. Great is too big for myself. I'll take decent, but I am just so honored and yes, yeah. I'm honored and again thankful to be back here for another year. I've been so excited for football this year. I feel like some years you go in and you're like, what, you're really excited, but some years it just kind of happens and it's here. This year I'm really excited, and I can't wait to get out there this weekend and be back with yourself, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be another great season. So
yeah, it is, and we love covering college football. It's something that we take a lot of pride in, and oftentimes I tell myself, do we do enough? And it's hard. We're covering 16 Division I teams. We wish we could cover the D2 and 3 programs. Unfortunately, that also requires a lot of manpower, and we don't have enough of that. But certainly, we're going to do the best we can to give you the best college football coverage in New England. We think we have the best college football coverage in New England. I certainly hope you concur, but certainly, we're going to cover as many games as we can, just like we did the last couple of years. We're going to cover as many games as we can and make sure that we're promoting all of our Division I college football programs. Before we do get started here, I do want to mention that we are brought to you by Yolked. Visit yolked.com today. Yolked is a tremendous product. I've used it in the past. I know a lot of athletes who use it. If you're looking for a safe, healthy, tasty protein option to enhance your workouts, well, Yolked is that option. Visit yolked.com today for more information and to place your order. All right, so hard to believe, but week 1 of the college football season is upon us, and that's crazy because it doesn't seem that long ago that we were going to spring practices, and quite frankly, it doesn't seem that long ago that we were wrapping up the season. But yet, here we are, and we're heading into week 1, and there's a lot of great matchups here now. We're going to break down all of the matchups involving the 16 Division I teams here in New England. But before we do that, Ryan, I wanted to kind of look back on the offseason here a little bit and talk about some of the top storylines that took place this offseason. And, of course, in the world of college football nowadays, with the portal, with NIL, it's just insanity. I mean, it's day-to-day insanity. There's no longer an offseason. There's all this movement, players wanting more money. There's just so much going on, and it's almost hard to keep up with. And in many ways, even for us, it's hard to cover. But what I want to do now is just talk about some of the top storylines in college football this offseason. And, of course, for me, number one is Bill O'Brien taking over at Boston College for Jeff Hafley. Look, Jeff Hafley, I thought, did a terrific job at Boston College from a recruiting standpoint. I thought that the program was competitive. I'm not sure that he was the guy that was going to take it to the next level. It's not that I don't think he was a good coach or didn't have a good staff, because I have a ton of respect for Jeff. I think he's a terrific coach. I think he's going to do a real good job in Green Bay with the Packers and that defense. And I think he had a really good staff on and off the field. I think that there's something to be said in this day and age, especially for hiring a coach with a little bit more cachet, if you will. And I think that's where Bill O'Brien comes in. He's an Andover guy, played at Brown. Of course, he coached at the Patriots for years. He then was a head coach at Penn State, head coach of the Houston Texans. He was a longtime assistant as well at the collegiate level. Is Bill O'Brien the guy that's going to get this Boston College program beyond this 6-6, 7-6 hump?
It's hard to say, because you have to ask yourself, is that just the ceiling that you can accomplish today at BC? Because that's kind of been the standard for a while now, right? And in a lot of ways, it kind of feels since the O'Brien days, it's just been like that. And
the Tom O'Brien days.
Yes, the Tom O'Brien days. And in a lot of ways, I do think it is, because I think sometimes these programs hire, I don't want to say retread guys, but the kind of bigger name. You're like, oh, that guy used to coach somewhere. Like, there we go. Like maybe this is a decent enough signing, but their juice isn't there anymore. I don't think that's the case with Bill O'Brien. I still think he has that energy and wanting to do something. And I think the fact that it's around here means something to him, and he knows what BC can be. I don't know if I don't know if he can get them to the college football playoff level. Granted, I know there's 12 teams now, but I do think that he could get them to 8-4. I do think that he has the ability to get people excited, get people back, at Alumni Stadium, and get people donating, which is the biggest thing now, right? Can you get people to donate to their NIL collectives and get people just doing to the program to upgrade facilities? So I do think he can be. Like, when I heard this hire, I thought I was pretty impressed by it. I have a lot of friends who are BC ticket members and, part of the Gridiron Club. And I know for a lot of them, it was easy to sign back up, and maybe that's the case with any new coach, but especially with Bill O'Brien, I think people weren't as shy to give this time around for a new coach because of who it is. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I love that he's a local guy. Hafley, I think, did what he could. I think he's a great defensive coach. He's going to be great in Green Bay. But I think this is what Hafley and Bill O'Brien needed. So,
in case you're wondering, I'm drinking out of my daughter's Stanley water bottle. So
I wasn't going to say anything, but I also have a ridiculous one with all my stickers on it too. So I'm not gonna give anything for it. Yeah.
Look, again, this is not a knock on the previous coaching staff. They did a terrific job recruiting. Let's not forget, Jeff Hafley was the first coach in program history to bring in a 4-star recruit. So they recruited their asses off. They brought in talent. I mean, Bill O'Brien did not inherit a bad roster here. The cupboard was far from bare. And I think the most impressive thing about the Boston College roster that he inherited is that a lot of guys could have entered the portal and jumped ship after Hafley left. They didn't do that. They stuck around. And so because of that, and we'll know more on Monday night after they play Florida State, but I do think because of that, he can really tap into that. He can really play into that and say, hey, these guys chose to stay. We've got talent here. We can win with these guys. Let's coach the hell out of them and get them to a place where we can win 8 games and get over the proverbial hump and play in a more higher profile bowl and really bring even more exposure to the Boston College program. Because let's face it, his hiring brought a ton of exposure to the program, and it rejuvenated national interest in the program again. But obviously now the key is he's got to go out and win. They've got to go out and win. It can no longer be 6-6, 7-6, and playing in the Fenway Bowl. Though all due respect to the Fenway Bowl,
of course,
it's not going to be enough. But the faithful want more, so we shall see. Of course, second biggest storyline this offseason is the retirement of Tim Murphy, and he was replaced by longtime Ivy League assistant coach Andrew Orich, who takes over for Murphy. Orich has a wealth of experience. Look, these are big shoes to fill, Ryan, but the thing is you needed to get someone at Harvard that understood Harvard and understood Ivy League football and how to coach in the league. Andrew Orich was that guy. He was able to keep most of the staff, so there'll be continuity for the players. I don't expect Harvard to drop off much here. I think the Crimson is still going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, congrats to him on a incredibly well-earned career. I think that to go out, have another great season, to go out, leaving the program in a great place is an accomplishment in itself, because sometimes you don't get to retire on your own terms. And to be able to do that, I think, is pretty special. So, yeah, I think he's going to just take the reins and continue to, play Harvard football. I think that what Harvard is very lucky is as great as he's always been, I think he built this program to be what it is today, to make it be consistent, to make people want to go there. And I think the Harvard name is always going to spark interest among those student athletes who maybe could go play in the FBS, but maybe want to be at a certain level academically that's a little bit different. And I think that that's never going to change. So as long as he can just keep this car moving, I think that it's hard for me to start all of a sudden see that, man, 5 years from now, Harvard are finishing in the bottom of the Ivy League every year. I don't think that's going to happen. So excited to see, a lot of change in this region for coaching. But yeah, I think he's going to kind of just take the keys, especially without losing a lot of guys.
Well, I think you bring up a good point too, where the Harvard education sells itself, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to get FBS caliber guys that are going to want to come to Harvard to get that education and play football. And the beauty of the Ivy League now is twofold. One, they're not affected by the portal like the FBS and FCS schools are. Guys there is no, you can transfer out, but it doesn't happen. And so the beauty of it is you can go to a Harvard, get your degree, and then turn around and graduate and then go play FBS football for a year and position yourself to potentially play on Sundays. So,
yeah,
I think it's a win-win, and you're seeing it with a lot of guys now. I mean, Thor Griffith, who played there last year, he's at Louisville. Jonathan Mendoza, who was at Yale, he's now at Louisville. So you're seeing it. Don't mind me. I'm trying to plug in my laptop.
No, you're good. You're good. I don't want to lose you here, so do what you got to do.
Yeah. As the as the cords choke me out. But I think it's one of those things where, to be honest with you, he's in a pretty good situation. I think Ivy League jobs are going to become more and more desirable, and I think Ulrich saw that, and he saw a great opportunity. I mean, who wouldn't want to be the head coach at Harvard? He took it, and now he's got the program in a spot where they can consistently contend like they have been. One of the other key storylines, of course, is Bryant moving to the CAA to add a fourth New England team to the Coastal Athletic Association. But for me, I think that this was a move that was long overdue. I think it's a great move for the conference. It's a great move for Brian. I think Brian had been building to that, went from the NEC to the Big South. I think that was ultimately their goal. I think they're there. Chris Merritt likes his football team. They're going to be young, over 40 new guys, but I think he likes the composition of his team. He thinks that they can play fast. He thinks that they can be more explosive. I think they're going to be a pretty good fit in the CAA. Can Bryant compete right out of the gate in this conference?
I don't know about this year. I think that, with having so much turnover and with the league kind of being in a certain place that it is, where it's the good teams are very good. And as silly as that sounds, it's hard for me to think they can jump right in. I think if they didn't lose so many guys, I would say that them finishing 6, 7, 8 in the CAA would actually make sense. But it does feel like a year transition might be kind of needed. But it's huge props to that school. Like the amount that they've done growing as far as their athletic program, and they've taken off in basketball. Football has, gone from just the place the Patriots used to practice to a very strong, FCS program. They're kind of setting themselves as the mold for what I think a lot of schools, like Stonehill and Merrimack, Sacred Heart, are kind of looking to be, right? So I don't know if they're going to jump in this year right away, but I definitely think they're going to be a thorn in team sides. I don't think it's going to be the case where they're a bottom feeder who lose by 20, 30 points a week. I think they're going to be kind of annoying to teams like Albany and Elon and schools like that. So maybe not right away, but I do think that there's no reason why they can't be better than Monmouth, or Elon in a couple years.
Well, and from a facility standpoint, to your point, if you go down there, I mean, there's construction going on right now where they're gonna add new offices, new space. They're gonna add a whole nother side of stands. There's already a new side of stands on one end of the stadium because the Rhode Island Soccer Club plays down there.
Yeah.
The professional team that's in Rhode Island. So they're hoping to keep those stands. All of a sudden now, if you do that, between what they have now and then you add those stands, I mean, now you're looking at a capacity of 12,000, 15,000. That's pretty good. And so I think the program is heading in an unbelievable direction. Kudos to Chris Merritt. He comes up here from Christopher Columbus High School. He has done a tremendous job building this program. They've recruited well. He's got a really good staff. They coach the guys up. And on top of that, now you're starting to get guys in the NFL, which makes the program even more appealing. You just saw Joe Andreessen, who played there. He just made the Buffalo Bills. Now he's a, upstate New York guy, which I'm sure, certainly adds to him making the Bills. But, I mean, Joe was a hell of a football player at Bryant. Grad transferred to Buffalo, led them in tackles, had a hell of a season there last year. All of a sudden, he gets a rookie minicamp invite with the Bills, and then he ends up making the team. So that can only help your program because now you can sell that in recruiting. You can tell guys, hey, look, if you come here, we can prepare you to play on Sundays. We can prepare you to play in the NFL. You can have a shot to play professionally if you come to Bryant. So certainly, I think you bring up a great point, Ryan. I think they're going to be competitive.
Yes.
It's a matter of how competitive can they be. I think that's That's going to be the key. And then I think one other storyline that I think is worth noting is UMass and UConn taking the next step. Now, of course, UMass is now going to be in the MAC. They're going in full time after this season. UConn, we've been hearing it all week now, speculation about them potentially joining the Big 12 at some point. But this is both programs made moves this offseason to try to put themselves back in position to potentially win enough games to become bowl eligible. Do you see what UMass and UConn have done this offseason being enough to help them get back in the right direction?
Well, with UMass, I definitely think so. It's how I started my preview. You know, I feel like last year when I wrote it, I was like, man, we're in dire straits. We got to go out and prove something, right? And then it didn't really happen. And then you're like, uh-oh. And if they didn't join the MAC, I would have started that preview a lot differently. I would have been like, oh my gosh, you can't afford to do this. But now you kind of have that cover. You kind of have the cover of, well, you know what? Like, even if they go 2-10, 3-9 this year, you're like, but you know what? We have the MAC next year. We have some stability. We have the ability to say we can recruit with these similar teams for sure. We have guaranteed opponents. We don't have to go out there every season and schedule games with random teams, and we can cut contracts with programs that we don't want to be scheduling anymore. So as a UMass alum, it's sad for me in a lot of ways to leave the A10. It's definitely not what it used to be back in the day, but a lot of regional ties, with the Philly, New York schools, URI. But with the way college football is going, it's kind of one of those things where you can be bummed about it, but this is just the reality of college football, and you kind of just got to take that. And I think that it's great for UMass because now, let's say Don Brown goes 8-4 this year, and he's like, you know what, I'm ready to retire. You can at least hire a coach to come in here and say, well, at least we're coming to the MAC. Trying to get a coach to say we're doing more independent football would be, well, what happened to Walt Bell? What happened to Mark Whipple? Like, I don't want to end up like those guys, right? So I think it really helps UMass just give them a cover, and it gives us a brand. With UConn, I'm a Big East basketball fan. I'd be sad to see them leave again, but I think it'd be fun. I think the Big 12 would be great for basketball. It'd be the best basketball conference in the country, that's for sure. It'd be weird to see, UConn playing, some of these Big 12 schools, but I think it's what they need. I think for football, it's absolutely what they need. They have great facilities. They have a great stadium that can get people to games. The idea of getting UCF in there, to renew the civil conflict, right. Little joke of it, whatever they had years ago. But Cincinnati, you have a lot of these schools who used to play in the AAC. So I think it'd be a smart move, but again, the traditional UConn fan might be having a panic attack right now thinking, wait, I can't go to the Bath Square Garden anymore to watch basketball, so for the Big East tournament, I don't know. I think it's good, but I wish, John, this is a whole other conversation. I just wish we could separate football from everything else because it makes no sense.
Kelly proposed that at the end of last season.
Yeah.
And I think we're heading in that direction where
I
hope
think
so. Football will be separated. Now, look, selfishly, I don't care about college hoops.
And that's totally fair. Yeah.
And I don't care about college hoops enough to worry about what the ramifications are for college hoops. I also am not naive to the fact that basketball is the breadwinner at UConn.
Right.
And the reality is, until your football could bring in more money, but you need to be way better. But I think the administration at UConn is looking at the landscape in college football right now and saying, if we can get into the Big 12, because I don't think they're done expanding the FBS playoffs. I think that there's another expansion coming. I think
for sure.
I think they're going to go to 16. And that might be it, but I'm not sold that they're done at 12. They're looking at this and saying, well, if this thing goes to 16, let's say in a few years, we have a shot to get in if we have a great year. So now all of a sudden, if you're good enough, you might be able to make a national title run in football. And then the possibilities are endless in terms of the potential financial boon there for the school. But yeah, make no mistake about it. They need to get into a conference. Now, one of the talking points that came out of that was that they wouldn't be joining the Big 12 potential until 2031. That doesn't help this program. They need to get in there way before 2031. So I don't know why that's the case, My guess is it's because they're going to need time to get their stuff together and do some facility upgrades and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, they need a conference because I think you bring up an excellent point. It's hard to take over an independent program. BYU realized that. That's why they ended up in the Big 12. You need a conference. It just makes the job more appealing. It's easier to recruit. It's easier to win and build a program at a school that's in an actual conference. You are watching the College Football Preview Show, sponsored by Yolked. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry, and this is, of course, our inaugural episode for the 2024 season. One final storyline is, of course, Sacred Heart and Merrimack leaving the NEC. They had to leave the NEC because the two schools decided to go to the MAAC in all other sports, with the exception of hockey in the case of Merrimack. I don't think either one of them is in there for hockey. But the bottom line is the football programs are independent. Now, Merrimack has taken advantage of it. They're playing Air Force and UConn this year, so kudos to them. But what are your thoughts on the two schools being independent, and how do you capitalize on it? I think Sacred Heart needs to look at what Merrimack is doing and say, hey, you know what? Let's go out there and make some money. I mean, we're not beholden to a league. We can schedule anybody.
It was strange when I saw that because the NEC just felt like a good fit for them, but I think that they probably see the writing on the wall of the NEC where it's a jump off conference. Bryant's left, and and unfortunately,
and I think you're going to see more and more schools. I don't think it may not exist in 5 years.
No, it's hard to think that it will, because it's always kind of been like that for every sport. I think it's just curious that they're doing this for football, because who knows how much they make in revenue for the NEC. I don't know what their numbers look like, but it's probably a little bit better to be in the NEC than not. But maybe Merrimack's looking at it like, if I can schedule 2 FBS games a year, that's enough money that we're missing by being in a conference, right? But it's an interesting move, and I think that they're probably expecting more dominoes to fall in the future for football. I think it's a good move for them, academically and across other sports. I think it makes more sense to join the MAAC, right? But I don't know. I think that it'll be fun for a little, but right, yeah.
They're the fake MAC, because the
right,
is a way older conference.
Right. But I think that long term, it's just not going to be sustainable. And I worry more. I don't know who I'd worry more about, because Merrimack's invested a lot in football. They've done a lot to Dwayne Stadium. I've been to Sacred Heart. It's a lot more reminiscent of a high school stadium than Merrimack is. They get a lot more donors being down by New York City. They just built a new hockey rink down there, right? So maybe the money is there. But I think that Merrimack's a little more well positioned to be somewhere bigger with football. But they're going to play each other for the Yankee the Yankee trophy, which I think is a little interesting, considering neither of them were ever in that conference back in the day.
In the Yankee conference.
Yeah. So I don't know how that really works, just getting the copyright to it. But it's an interesting move, and I don't think that they would drop football, right? I don't, especially not Merrimack at this point, but who knows with Sacred Heart? I don't want to put that out there. I don't want that to happen, but it's an odd move. So,
well, it's an odd move, but it was one that was made with an eye towards generating revenue in the other sports that are in the MAC.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that ultimately that was their goal. They probably looked at it and said, we can make more money in basketball right now playing in the MAC,
right?
And find ourselves in the tournament, and we can get a piece of that pie, rather than if we're sitting in the NEC. All good, and I get it. But I think at the end of the day, you bring up an interesting point, and I think it's a valid one. I see Merrimack using this as the impetus to build a strong football program through the independent route. But I think eventually you could see there could come a day where you could see Merrimack in the CAA potentially for football.
Yeah, right.
Because the CAA is losing Richmond. They're moving over to the Patriot League. They're losing Delaware. They're going FBS.
Right.
I would not be surprised if a year from now, Merrimack's in the CAA. Certainly, if I were Merrimack, and they could be positioning themselves here saying, hey, listen, we're playing FBS schools. The money's going to start coming in. We'll make upgrades to Dwayne Stadium. We'll make upgrades to the facility. they could be setting themselves up to end up in the CAA, and it would make sense. I think the CAA is ultimately going to become more of a Northern Conference anyway.
Right.
So even though you've had a bunch of Southern schools enter the conference in the last couple of years, I could see a scenario where long-term it's more of a Mid-Atlantic Northeast conference than anything else like it used to be.
Right.
But I think it's one of those things where Sacred Heart's the wild card here. What do they do? Because like you said, and I think you bring up another good point, they don't invest in football the way they should. When you look at the success that that program has had through the years, and Mark Knopfler's done a good job there. Last couple of years have been tough, but the investment isn't there. And I think I'm curious to see now if they'll make more of an investment in football. It's hard to tell there. I think with Merrimack, it's a little easier to see. I think with Sacred Heart, it's a different deal basically, because again, you don't know. All right, let's shift gears here now and talk week 1 of college football. It's hard to believe that it's here, but it is. So let's break down all of the matchups in the first weekend of college football for the 16 Division I New England teams that we have here in the region that we cover at New England Football Journal. Now, of course, we've got 2 games with local implications tomorrow night. UNH is at the Bounce House. They visit Central Florida to take on Gus Malzahn's Golden Knights. And CCSU, Central Connecticut State University, is going to be out in Michigan taking on the Central Michigan Chippewas. Let's start with UNH at Central Florida. Look, UNH, when you look at where the Wildcats are right now, the conversation starts with how do you replace Max Brosmer, Dylan Lobby, 2 of the most productive players in program history. Brosmer is on track to be the starting quarterback of the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Dylan Lobby just made the Las Vegas Raiders. Filling those shoes is going to be virtually impossible. But there are other guys here that they got to replace, especially up front, that are going to be hard to replace. Ricky Santos likes where his football team is. I think Seth Morgan, the transfer, is going to be a really good fit for them. You got Logan Tomlinson back at receiver. They've got a good skill group. Running back, it's going to be more by committee. But is this evolving UNH team good enough, in your opinion, Ryan, to go down there and be competitive, or are they going to be in over their heads?
It's a good question. I think if this were last year's squad, I would definitely feel a lot better, just for the continuity and and the weapons, and especially for how close. I mean, I'll contend UNH should have beat Central Michigan last year. They had them on the ropes. They lost by 3 points in a crazy high scoring game. It's tough for me to think that they can come in and do that this year. Week 1 is so hard because I want to be bold with some takes, but I just don't know enough, so I have to play more conservative. And I think with all this change at UCF, coming to the Big 12 and trying to cement themselves as a contender, because I think they can do really well in that conference. I think Gus Malzahn's going to try and run up the score if he can. He can't afford to have it can't be 31-17. He needs to win that game 41-14, right? And they have KJ Jefferson, who transferred in from Arkansas. I think they're going to try and use the Wildcats as an example with that. And I do think that they'll cover the spread in that game. I believe, if I'm not mistaken in my notes here, it's 41.5. Well, I don't know if they cover 40. I can see them winning.
41.5, but I agree with you. I think they win by 4 or 5 scores.
Yeah. So I hate saying that because this is a tough game, but, when we were talking to Coach Santos at the media day, we asked him, how do you feel about getting this game earlier in the season? And he liked it a lot better, right? You play when you have to play, but I think that this is an advantage to play this game early. It's not like last year we had Central Michigan kind of mid-September. Go down there, have a good time, be in that FBS environment, give them hell, but don't hurt yourselves and do what you can. But I do think that it's just the team that they're facing in this circumstance is what is going to kind of do them in. So I definitely will take the Golden Knights there, but I'm excited for the Wildcats this year. I think that, as I wrote in my preview, I think they're going to fly under the radar a little bit. They've got a lot of good players returning on defense, a lot of change at the line, like you said, but I definitely think that they're talented enough to be competitive this year in the CAA. But this is going to be a more challenging game, I think.
They've got to be better on defense. I mean, that's the thing. There's too much talent on that side of the ball, especially up front, for them to be as generous as they were at times last year. They've got to be better on defense. And unfortunately, this isn't the kind of matchup you want to start the season to help your defense. But you know what? You got Silver, you got Ruiz. They'll bring pressure off the edge. This is also the kind of game, and KJ Jefferson's a different kind of dude. They're not going to see another quarterback like that the rest of the season.
No.
Big boy. But all that being said, this is a golden opportunity for your defense to step up and play better and prove that they have improved. They're going to be a bigger part of the overall success of this team than they've been in the past. I mean, UNH, let's face it, through the years has been an offensive-driven program. So, but the defense is going to play a bigger role in things for them this season. As I mentioned, Central Connecticut State visits Central Michigan. Look, I said this the other night, and I'm gonna reiterate it here. Kudos to Adam Lechtenberg for playing up, for scheduling up. Central Connecticut State's a program that has traditionally played up. A couple of years ago, they went down and played the University of Miami. So it's, whether it's Lechtenberg or Ryan McCarthy, it doesn't matter. These guys have scheduled up and they've played good opponents. And I think at the end of the day, yeah, this is a game that they probably lose by 3 or 4 scores, but it's a good opportunity to go up there, compete, let your guys develop. But again, we talk about recruiting. Games like this, Ryan, are important in recruiting. You got to sell guys to come to a school like Central Connecticut State. One of your selling points can be, hey, we play a couple of FBS schools. Come on up. We play a couple of group of 5 schools. You can compete on a bigger stage than you will for most of the season and get the attention you need to develop into the player you want to be. So I think in many ways, yes, they're a substantial underdog here, but I think it's a good opportunity for a young program like this that wants to get back to where it was a few years ago. I think this is a good opportunity to expand the brand, but to also develop the program.
Right. Yeah. And it's a tough place to recruit to in the first place, just because you have a lot of programs who are similar around you, right? You're getting a lot of kids, from the DC area, the New York area.
Yeah.
So you're competing with a lot of folks. But I think what's impressive is that they were able to keep Elijah Howard, right, to come back this year. They get Brady Olson from UMass, who I think, might be in might be in a better situation than he was at UMass. Talking earlier about the Ivy guys transfer, and Isaac Boston from Dartmouth goes there. Yeah. So the spread's 31.5. I might be inclined to take under that. I don't think Central Michigan is some juggernaut. I don't care if it's Central Connecticut State. They're not going to play them as close as UNH did last year. But I'd be inclined to think that they can cover 31 points. Absolutely. And I think that this is a decent enough core returning that could have a much more competitive season in the NEC for sure.
And one thing you could say, too, about Central Connecticut State is they'll play good defense. They have played good defense through the years. I think with that running game, now you add Olsen in the mix. He can balance things out for them offensively a little bit. They can run more play action, take some shots down the field. I think this is a team that once you get past this part of the schedule, I think this is a team that could surprise people. I think this is a team that could be a lot more competitive in the NEC than people think. Lechtenberg is a really good offensive coach. And so I think that you're going to see a team that's going to be balanced. You're going to see a team that's going to be physical. And I think you're going to see a team that can score some points. And I think ultimately that'll benefit them later on. And who knows? I mean, you win the NEC, you get an automatic playoff berth. Anything is possible, as Kevin Garnett once taught us.
That's right.
Moving along to Friday night, of course, the Maine Black Bears kick off their season at home at Alphonse Stadium against the Colgate Red Raiders. Colgate finished strong last year, 6-1 in their last 7. Tough matchup for Jordan Stevens' squad. Look, this is a big year for Stevens in Maine. They need to take that next step. Offensively, they should be really good. They've got a lot of talent back, particularly at receiver, tight end. You got the Mercer transfer, Carter Peavy. It appears he's going to be their starting quarterback, although that quarterback competition went deep into camp. But needless to say, they're going to be young in some spots on defense. But this Maine team, I think, is positioned to where they need to get off to a good start, and I think they have the pieces to do it.
Yeah, 2-9 last year, was there's just something about, maybe it's the brand, the helmet, where I'm always just like, they're going to be competitive. And there were a lot of games that Maine was competitive in last season. I like this matchup being at home. I like that it's on a Friday night, under the lights. You're going to get students back this weekend. You're going to get a lot of people out for this game. Colgate, somehow I found this, but the Action Network has Colgate at only 1.5 point favorite. There's not, you don't really see a lot of lines in the FCS, but I'd be inclined to take the Black Bears here just because I think that as much as I do think, Colgate was picked to finish 4th in the Patriot League. They had a vote for first place. They've got a good wide receiver, a solid offensive line. So I think it'll be a close game. And if it's going to be a close game, I'm just going to take my allegiance to New England and go with the Black Bears here. I like the spot they're in, but they have to show something this season, right? Like you said, they can't afford to have a 3rd straight losing season. They can't lose to UNH again at the end of the season. Like they have to just be like, hey, we've had a couple down years, but 2021, we beat UMass, right? And we played a lot of teams really, really tough that year, right? And they need to kind of get back to that football. And I think this is a good spot for them. If this were on the road, I wouldn't really like that. But being at home, I'm gonna take them just for that sake.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like them in this game too. I think they get off to a good start. I mean, they got to go to Montana State next week. So Montana State, of course, beat New Mexico last week. So that's not going to be easy. Later on this season, they play Oklahoma. They go to Norman. So one thing you can say about Stevens is he's not afraid to schedule up, but they need this one. They need to get off to a good start. They need positive vibes to start the season. I don't want to sound cheesy and lame, but the reality is they can win this game. Yeah, Montana State's going to be a tough game to win. But after that, until they get to Oklahoma, they got some games in there where they can be competitive and possibly win them. And so I think a good start is paramount for this program because you can't break that 1-10, or 1-11, 2-9 cycle if you're not getting off to a strong start and winning early in the season. And I think they need to do that. I think it's important. I think they get it done. 1.5 to me, give me them as dogs all day. I mean, that's not a knock on Colgate.
Of course,
but Colgate's a good program. They've been a good program in the Patriot League, and this should be a good matchup for Maine. But I think ultimately, this offense is going to be pretty good. You got some guys that I think are going to garner national attention, whether it be Heisey or Gillette or Moss. I mentioned Peavy if he's their guy. They could potentially be really good on offense. And as we've seen through the years, Ryan, when Nick Charlton was there, they were one of the best offenses in the CAA. They have played good football in recent years. And something tells me that this year's Bryce Cowell Musket game could be pretty competitive. If Maine starts making progress and UNH has a hard time replacing some of the guys they lost, excuse me, it could be pretty competitive. All right, next up, let's go to Saturday now. We'll do the Saturday slate. I want to start off with a game that I think is interesting because we talked about this program earlier. If nothing else, it helps you build the brand nationally, and that's Merrimack at Air Force. Look, let's be honest. Coach Genetti's squad is going to have their hands full with that Air Force option offense. Troy Calhoun and his staff do a great job of running the triple option and blending it with the spread and other looks. I love that Merrimack is going out there and playing this game. I love that they're playing UConn after this. I think that that's what a program needs if they want to be a serious Division I program. It brings in revenue. It builds your national brand. Yeah, you're going to go out there and probably get your ass kicked, but it's good for the development of the program. I think Merrimack's going to have a tough time competing in this game, but I think it's great that they're going out there and playing it.
Yeah, and I think to your point earlier, when we were talking about them versus Sacred Heart, and what's impressive, even some of their home games this year, it almost jumped out to me. They're playing Maine at home, Dartmouth at home, right? They get Colgate later in the season, on the road at Fordham that last week of the season. That'll be a tough game for, I think, both teams because Fordham, is going to be right in the mix for the FCS playoffs at that point. I think it's really impressive that this is what they're able to do, and always impressive for me thinking of who Merrimack was growing up next door for me in the Merrimack Valley to think that they're taking on Air Force. So, and I think what also favors Merrimack is they run the ball really well. Malachi Anthony is a mobile quarterback. They also got a huge get in Jermaine Corbett from Stonehill. Yep. You have Donovan Wadley back, who is
that running game is going to be really good.
Yeah, so
those two are going to be a good 1-2 punch with Wadley and Corbett.
So yeah, if the defense can kind of stay in the game, and Air Force is going to be running the whole game, of course. The line right now is
between the two teams, the game might be over in about an hour and 15 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a 47.5 kind of was like, oh, that seems kind of low. But I'm like, you know what, though? They're going to run the clock out. 30.5 points at the spread. Air Force is a great team. A lot of people have them maybe being a dark horse to win the Mountain West. So maybe not so much dark horse. They're up there competing, I suppose, with Boise State. But I'm definitely going Air Force here. But I'm curious to see how well Merrimack comes out because they have some guys returning. They have a really interesting squad. But I do think Air Force can cover that. But it's a great opportunity for them, again, just to think that they're playing Air Force. It's huge.
Yeah, and I'm excited about Malachi Anthony, too. You mentioned him. I think he's poised to have a big year as a dual threat guy. He could be one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the area. So Merrimack's going to be fun to watch this year. And, of course, we're going to cover both of those games when Maine comes to town, Dartmouth comes to town. We'll also be there on November 16th for the Yankee Conference Championship game against Sacred Heart. So, I think you bring up a great point, man. And this is why I could see them ultimately ending up in the CAA. To my earlier point, when you play a schedule like that, you're not playing a schedule like that if you don't want to be big time. That's a program that's sending the message, no, football matters to us. We want to be good at it. We're going to schedule that way. So kudos to the Merrimack administration, Coach Giannetti, for scheduling the way that they have. I think it's fantastic. And look, Giannetti's been there a long time, right? Coach G's been there a long time. He was there he's been there, 19, 20 years? I mean, he's seen that Merrimack program grow and evolve. He wants to take it I think Dan Curran took it to another level. I think that Giannetti wants to take it to an even higher level. So I think it's, again, I'm excited to see what Merrimack does this season. All right, staying with the Saturday slate. Speaking of Merrimack, let's talk about former Merrimack coach Dan Curran. He leads his Holy Cross Crusaders into Meade Stadium on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Our Tony Catalina is going to be there to take on the URI Rams. And this is a great matchup to start the season, Ryan. And to quote the great Jim Ross, and I think I'm quoting him for the second time in 2 shows, it's going to be a slobber knocker. Both of these teams are physical. They've got a bunch of backs that they can throw at you. They want to run downhill. They want to establish the line of scrimmage. I think that this is a great matchup to kick off the season locally. Yeah,
honestly, a huge shout out to Holy Cross. I know these games are decided, a lot of times earlier, and there's been a lot of change. But URI this week, UNH the week after that, Bryant, Yale, Syracuse to start the year. Then of course you get into your conference late, but then you get at Harvard later in the year. Like, they're not backing down. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of different things happening. Like, you could say that, I was looking the other day, like, what would be like my favorite games of every week. And I was hard for me not to pick Holy Cross almost every week because of them always rising the challenge and URI wanting to get out of this, 6-5. So this is my favorite game of the weekend, hands down. Right. And I wish I could be at it, to be honest, because I think it's going to be awesome. And I'm not sure who to favor. I don't know what your thoughts are, but URI is a very intriguing team, but I'm nervous about Holy Cross because they have lost so much. I know they return, a lot of guys that came back last year, and, Dan Curran did a phenomenal job at Merrimack to kind of build them to where they are today. But, Hunter Helms at quarterback, Malik Grant at running back from Sacred Heart is a pretty good combination.
Loaded at running back. I did my camp visit there a couple of weeks ago, and they have 4 backs that can touch the ball at any time and make an impact play. Whether it be Malik Grant, the Sacred Heart transfer, or whether it be Jaden Griffin, Deion Silas, Gabe Sloat, who was voted team captain. I mean, talk about working your ass off and achieving a goal. I mean, Carson Harwood, the former CM standout. I mean, they have a plethora of backs that can touch the ball and make a difference. Jaden Griffin. I mean, it's the list goes on and on. It's going to be interesting. They're going to play both quarterbacks. Jim Fleming said this on Monday. I was on the call. They're going to play both Hunter Helms and Devin Farrell. Now, that for Holy Cross, that adds to your preparation here, because now you're prepping for 2 quarterbacks who stylistically are very different. I'm not surprised. I've known Pat Murphy for a while. I'm not surprised that Murph wants to play both of them. For me, I think this game comes down to the line of scrimmage, though. And I think both teams have graduated a lot, but I think both teams bring back talent up front, too. And I think that's, not to sound cliche, but I think that's where this game is going to be won, is the line of scrimmage. I think both programs are going to want to run the football, establish that physical presence. It's going to come down to who can control the line of scrimmage and who can make some big plays over the top in the passing game. And again, don't sleep on Joe Pizanski, man. He waited for this opportunity to be the guy at Holy Cross. It's his team now. You got Jordan Fuller back. You know, you got Justin Shorter at receiver. They've got the pieces to be Holy Cross. They may not necessarily have the name cachet they've had in recent years under Bob Chesney, but they have enough with Dan Kern in a very good staff that they're going to be competitive. But I'm with you. I think this is a fantastic matchup. Next up, and by the way, who are we picking? It's a tough one to pick. I'm picking URI. I think ultimately being at home, I think they're a little deeper. That's the difference.
That's who I go to. And I think, again, a 7 p.m. game under the lights to start the week, to start the season, against the regional rival. And it's great. A lot of these too, we're seeing a lot of regional rivals or teams play each other that you would think have played each other a lot, but they haven't. I was looking at URI and Holy Cross haven't played as much. I'm going with the Rams too because I like their depth more. They have more just continuity. Continuity for me is early on in the year is what I'm going to look at before stats. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going with Rhodey like yourself.
All right, next matchup, we have Delaware State visiting Sacred Heart on Saturday night at 6 p.m. And look, this is a big year for the Pioneers. They need a turnaround season. They've lost a lot. As we mentioned earlier, Malik Grant left via the portal. Carson Primrose via the portal. Both of them went to URI. They also lost Arsheen Giles, arguably the best corner in the NEC. He went to UMass. So they've lost a lot. But Mark Knopfrey's done a good job recruiting there. You mentioned they recruit New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. They have a solid recruiting foundation. Undecided at quarterback. They really don't know what they're going to do there yet. Knopfrey didn't announce anything in camp as to who was the leader in the clubhouse, if you will. But Sacred Heart's been through a lot the last 2 years. This program needs a turnaround season. Delaware State coming off I believe it was a 35-14 loss at Hawaii last Saturday night. They played the Rainbow Warriors tough. Good skill. I think they're going to present some matchup problems for Sacred Heart. The New England guy in me wants to pick the Pioneers here, but I think Delaware State's slightly better.
Same, yeah. This is unlike Maine earlier. I don't know who the quarterback is. You don't have, Malik Grant. It's so much transitioning this year at Sacred Heart, and it's hard for me to, 2 years ago there was a lot to be excited about, and they had a lot of great players, and so I'm going to go Delaware State here because, again, it's continuity, right? They're returning their starting quarterback from last year. They're returning their starting running back from last year, who was MEAC, Rookie of the Year 2 years ago. So I'm going to have to go with Delaware State as much as I don't, wouldn't normally, because I do know that they have struggled a lot in the past. I also think their color scheme is super weird to go with a Hornet or whatever they are. So it pains me to pick them, but I'm going to go with DSU. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing here too is, look, I think Sacred Heart's going to play good defense. They've always
did all last year.
Defense. Yeah, they did all last year. They play good defense, and they have under Coach Knopfrey. But it's, again, the offense has been their bugaboo. I mean, like you said, you don't know who the quarterback is. Not sure the running game's going to be as good. They've got a lot to sort out. They were a mess on offense last year. They've got to figure it out and be better because, again, I saw them against Stonehill last year. I covered that game. The defense kept them in the game. They didn't get key stops when they needed them. But, again, if their offense was able to finish drives instead of kicking field goals, they might win that game. Stonehill ends up winning it. But I just think it's one of those things where this program needs to get back to its identity. When Julius Chestnut was there, run the football, physical, get downhill, and then play great downhill defense. And that's how you win the NEC, and that's how they won 4 NEC titles in 10 years. So
right.
They need to get back to that. And hopefully now as an independent, they beef up the schedule. That might help them in terms of more national recruiting. So who knows? We'll see. Next up, we have UConn travels. Actually, I'm sorry. We're gonna do that game next. We have Bryant traveling to Delaware in their inaugural CAA matchup. And I talked to Chris Merritt when I went down there for my camp visit a couple weeks ago. and I talked to a couple of the coaches, and a couple of the coaches said to me, Ryan, that they felt that this Delaware team on film was as good as the FCS schools they had. I'm sorry, the FBS schools that they had played the last couple of years. And keep in mind, they played UNLV at Allegiant Stadium last year.
Right.
UNLV had a great year. 2 years ago, they almost beat FIU. So if these guys think that this Delaware team might be better than those two teams, then Ryan Carty has one hell of a football team down there at Delaware.
Yeah, I think it's a tough matchup to start the season for them as far as the CAA opponent that they're taking on, right? I'm sure that, first year in the CAA, they would have rather maybe had this be a game against another FCS club that they feel more on par with, as opposed to a team that's getting prepped to join the, Conference USA in a year or two. So I'm going to go with the Blue Hens here just because they've got, they had some first place votes in the CAA, even though they were picked to finish fifth. I think, some of those teams at the top are interchangeable. They've got a good running back in Marcus Yarns, who was first team all CAA. So I'm going to go with the Blue Hens here. Again, I just think it's a tough spot to be, but it feels weird seeing Bryant picked 15th of 16, right, in that preseason poll, just because of where they've been. But again, I think it's what we said earlier. They just need a little bit of time to transition while they figure this out and get their feet wet. So, yeah, I think Delaware has another great year, and they keep getting ready for the CAA, for the FBS.
And of course, Coastal Carolina transfer Jared Guest was named the starting quarterback at Bryant pretty early. I mean, Coach Merritt named him the starter at CAA Media Day. So got a chance to see Jared throw. Impressive. Their quarterback room is impressive. Bryant is coming, folks. This could be a turbulent year because it's their first year in the CAA, but they're gonna be a player in that conference in the coming years. I think that I agree with you. I'm gonna go Delaware here. I think this is a tougher matchup. By the way, you went Delaware State in the previous matchup, correct?
I did, yeah.
So I didn't finish my statement. I'm going to go full New England honk here. I'm going with the Pios.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right.
We didn't do our – remember now, folks, we haven't done our mythical lines that me and Barry like to do. We're going to start that up week 2 where we make up lines for these games.
Yeah.
But we didn't – we kind of wanted to slow play it here in week 1. But, yeah, I'm going to go with the Pios. Why not? And in this game, like I said, I'm going to go with Delaware. I think Bryant's got some good talent. I think they're going to get better as the year goes on. I think that Delaware is just in a better spot right now. They're the more talented team. The other thing is I think schematically they're going to give them a lot of problems, especially on defense. I think Delaware ultimately wins this one, probably by a couple of scores anyway, 2 to 3 scores, 14 to 17 points is what I predict. All right, next up we have UConn at Maryland. And, of course, Huskies coach Jim Mora announced yesterday that Wisconsin transfer Nick Evers is the team's starting quarterback. He beat out Joe Fagnano, Cole Welliver, and Tucker McDonald. Bit surprised there because early in camp, people were telling me that Evers looked shaky. And it appears, and I kept hearing that Cole Welliver, the true freshman out of Texas, looked pretty good. And it appears that Evers must have bridged that gap, and then he turned it on, and he took over as their starting quarterback. Look, this is a tough matchup for UConn. Make no mistake about it. Maryland is a good program. Mike Loxley's done a tremendous job there. He's built that up. They don't know who their starter is going to be either. So quarterback play in this game could be shaky. Can UConn win this game, or is Maryland just so much better in all these other spots? And that's going to be the difference. Don't forget the Huskies break in a new offensive coordinator, too, in Gordon Samus.
Yeah, if this were, Jim Mora year 1, I would feel a lot better about it, but I don't love Maryland here. I don't, they're 20.5-point favorites. I think UConn.
I'm with you here. I might be inclined to take the under here.
Yeah, I think that UConn can cover that. I just still think that Maryland has a lot more talent overall to win, but by no means do I think it's going to be some blowout. I'd be very surprised if that was the case. I love this matchup. I love the East Coast matchup between UConn and Maryland. I wish Maryland were not in the Big Ten and we're still, playing our teams more, maybe the ACC, Big East, or back when, things used like that used to matter. But I love UConn in this spot. I think something that I'm bringing up that may or may not be true, but in the NIL era, it's interesting to think that a guy like Nick Evers, getting him here, is a big feat, and a guy like that's probably getting NIL money, and you got to wonder.
And their NIL initiative has been awesome.
Yeah, UConn is very dedicated to that, but I have to wonder that in this new era of college football, if there's an air of, if you're paying a guy NIL money, they might play more than other guys who might be more impressive. I'm not saying that's why he got the role.
Paying him more NIL money than those other guys,
right? So
you're going to be more likely to play him. We're not suggesting that that's why Nick Evers is.
By no means, yeah. By no means, yeah.
We're just saying that sometimes it does factor in. Jim did not elaborate whether.
No.
Nor would he. And we're not taking anything away from Nick. All we're saying is that in some cases that does factor in.
Right. Yeah. So it's curious to think in the future as that goes, but I think his pedigree is so talented that it kind of feels like a no-brainer to have him start either way. Right. I mean,
they've got a quarterback out of Texas.
Right. Yeah. It's
Oklahoma. I mean,
right.
He's making his first career start, Saturday.
Which is crazy to think about considering where he's been.
Start at UConn. It's his first career start.
Right. Yeah, and
you look at him, 6'3", 200 pounds, athletic. I mean, he can make every throw in the playbook. He can really sling it. It's a clean, effortless release. Good pocket management. I mean, again, you could see why the staff decided to give him a shot. The other thing is he's got 3 years of eligibility. You play him this year, he has success. More than likely, he stays.
Right. I mean, they've got TJ Sheffield coming in from Purdue. It stinks to lose, Justin Jolly to the portal, but, I think that they've got a lot of talent on this team, and, Cam Edwards.
It's poised to have a big year for them at receiver. I like their tight end group. And I like their backs. I mean, if Victor Rosa can stay healthy with Cam Edwards, that's going to be a pretty good 1-2 punch, especially because they're going to be running behind a really talented offensive line with Valentin Sen and Chase Lunt and Chris Fortin. I mean, they bring back 3 out of 5 starters. That's a pretty good group.
Yeah, and when you look at a lot of the guys returning on defense, Bryce Yates, Jaden McDonald, these are guys who are very, very talented. That I think that if you're Maryland, you've lost Taulia Tagovailoa, right, to his brother. You still don't have a guy. How are they coming in and just all of a sudden going to wipe off UConn? I don't care who that is. I think UConn showed stuff last year. They just had a really, really difficult schedule. Right, and they lose Joe Fagiano at the beginning of the season. So I really like UConn to cover here. I don't know about outright win, but I definitely think that looking at their schedule this year, this is a team that can be back to 6-6. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and they play 8 home games.
Right, which is crazy. Yeah.
Tony Catalina is going to be a busy man this fall. I told him, I'm like, you should talk to Moore to see if you can get a cot in the office between him and Stone. Stone's going to be living at BC. Catalina will be living at UConn. You'll be living at UMass, which once upon a time you were living at UMass.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Oh, yeah. And I love UConn's schedule, too. I mean, they might as well be joining the ACC, taking on Syracuse, Wake Forest, Duke. I mean, Maryland once upon a time in the ACC. So I love the schedule. I love where UConn's at coming in this year. And I'd be surprised if they didn't win, at least 4 or 5 games. So.
Well, yeah. William Lecomte, I'm probably butchering his last name, joins the show. Thanks for checking in, William. Appreciate it. Watch out for UConn. And I think that this thread is, based on this, it's actually not bad. I thought it was going to go off the rails here. He proclaims he's drunk.
Yeah, it's you must be.
If you're going to win a bowl game, he's definitely drunk.
Yeah. Are we talking Fenway Bowl or are we talking?
We would love to see UConn win a bowl game. They should have in 2022. I don't disagree with that, man. They were playing really good football down the stretch. I think William's right. It was a little disappointing to see them not win it, but I don't think he's wrong. I thought that they would have finished with a bowl win. So hopefully this is the year. And William lets us know that he's from Fairfield County. Awesome. We love Connecticut. We're trying to get in there, my friend, and do more with high school football and make sure we cover all the other programs. Of course, we do cover UConn, but thank you for checking in, buddy. We really appreciate it. Have a good night. Make sure you stay safe. And you know what? For your sake, go Huskies.
That's
all right. Let's shift gears here now and talk a little bit about your alma mater. You're going to be there on Saturday when Eastern Michigan visits UMass to take on the Minutemen. It is the season opener for the Minutemen. It is the home opener at McGuirk. Big year for Don Brown, man. I know. I feel like we've said this forever. Right? I feel like it almost feels like we've been saying it for 5 years now. He's only going into his third. I think Stone thought he was going into his fifth the other night. I mean, I was wondering if Stone was drunk, but but it's not cliche to say this though, Ryan. This is a big year for this program. This is the year where you take that step traditionally. Is UMass in a position to take that step? Is this truly the year? Because they have a wonky schedule, man. I mean, you play a bunch of MAC teams, but then you play 3 SEC teams. It's crazy. Missouri comes to McGuirk. It's nuts. Is this the year that they can take that next step and possibly contend for a bowl?
I don't know about a bowl, but I do think that I was very emphatic in picking them at 5-7, which, if by UMass terms is an accomplishment, just simply because of the fact that of where we've been. And like you said, it feels like insanity. Like, this is the year they need to be big. This is the year. But I truly do believe that this is a year that 5-7 should be what they attain. And this is kind of my standard, right? Every year, there's been so many times where they play a team close and they lose, but you're like, but that was a close game. They're building something. This is you cannot have that frame of mindset this year as a fan, as a program, as anything. If they play Buffalo in week 3 close and they lose, let's say 24-21, right? And that's a failure. You need to just win the games you're supposed to, right? And that's been UMass's problem for the entire FBS history here. They need to win the games they're supposed to. They can't play close to Eastern Michigan and be like, hey, you know what, though? It's 31-30. No. You need to win. You needed to win that game because the way the schedule set up this year is brutal in the second half. The beginning of the season is where you need to get your wins if you're going to be impressive. I'm not sitting here saying it'd be a failure if they don't go 6-6, but if they go 4-8 again, it's going to be a huge, huge disappointment. 5-7 to me feels like where you're looking at, and it's insanely doable. It's just this is the best program they've had in their time in the FBS. They have depth, they have big players, they have Shane Montgomery here. It's absolutely their time to do that, but I'm always scared in the back of my head. I'm already scared of the fact that on Saturday, the weather's looking like it did last year against Miami, Ohio, when the game started at 3:30 and I didn't leave McGuirk till midnight. And I can't do that again. I literally cannot be driving on those.
Yeah, we need you to stay married.
Yeah. I can't do like that. Game just needs to happen. But you know what though? That's my biggest fear about Saturday.
What you're doing here is you're lobbying for hazard pay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, maybe bonus health insurance because what I have is, yeah. But I will say that's what I'm more nervous about Saturday.
Five Guys voucher do? I mean, there's a couple of Five Guys on the way home. Maybe a Five Guys voucher.
I will take. I mean, you need a hell of a lot of money for a Five Guys voucher. That's for sure. With how expensive it is. Yeah, but I'm more nervous Saturday about the weather being bad. I'm not nervous about UMass's ability to win the game. They return more than Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan's had their number the last couple seasons. It's at home. There's going to be a big crowd, I think, barring good weather.
Beat them out there 2 years ago, though, in Esplanty. They should have beat them.
Yeah, last year they went up in the last few minutes of the game until there was that freak final play or was the kick return or something crazy happened that Eastern Michigan won. So it's the year. And again, it sounds crazy, but if you can go 5-7 this year and set that table for entering the MAC next year with more investment in NIL, with more interest around the program, with I think Don Brown really coming into his own for recruiting, there's no reason why next year you shouldn't be competing in the MAC right away. And yeah, it's the year where if we're sitting here in November and we're talking about this team going less, going 4-8 or less, it's going to be a super, super big disappointment.
Well, we've got plenty of time to speculate if that happens.
Of course.
What do you think happens on Saturday? Do they get it done? Do they start the season 1-0?
Absolutely. I will always rant about UMass, so always just cut me off. Got to have like a safe word for them. They're favored at 1.5. Over-under is a little high at 49.5, but I'm definitely taking UMass. I think that they win this game something like, I don't know, let's say 24-17, right? 24-20, maybe something like that. Eastern Michigan gets a score late, but we just got a lot more returning talent. I think this is going to be a win for the Minutemen. And again, hoping for good enough weather so we can enjoy a good day tailgating and a good day of no repeat like last year.
Listen, make sure you don't get crap face here. We need you to write a good story if they do win. Hey,
those days are behind me. Yeah.
In all seriousness, though, I still think it comes down to one thing and one thing only. I think that their success in many ways will hinge on the health of Tyson Fomashon. If Puma can't stay healthy, if they go through what they did last year, and I think Ahmad Hassan would be ready to step in and do a nice job if they needed him to. But Puma is so dynamic, and he's such a difference maker in this offense, and he's such a great fit in Shane Montgomery's system because of what he can do. And it looks like their running game, which had its ups and its downs in the spring, started off slow in fall camp, really came on. If they can marry that running game with him and what he can do and how dynamic he is, they've got 3 or 4 receivers that can make big plays on the perimeter, namely Anthony Simpson. So, look, 2 things for me. Puma's got to stay healthy, and their defense has to be better. Their defense was such a disappointment last year. Couldn't get off the field on third down. They need to be better. If Puma stays healthy and the defense improves, I think 5-7 is realistic. But to your point earlier, a good start is paramount. And with that said, I'm going to pick them to win as well.
Yeah,
I'm nervous about this pick because I think Eastern Michigan has been pretty good the last few years, and they can certainly win in an environment like this. But I think ultimately, if UMass is going to have the kind of season we think they could have, they need this one. They got to get it. I think they get the job done, and they start the season 1-0. All right, couple minutes left here, so we've got our final game of the weekend. I didn't miss any, did I?
No, you got him. Yep.
We got him. All right.
Yep.
That's what we do here. We're pros.
Yes.
By the way, William checks in. Couple of folks checked in. Bill Vaughn says UMass going bowling, baby. He says need a fast start. We agree with you, Bill. Couldn't agree with you more, man. William comes back and says UMass and UConn have always had potential. Yes, they have. But again, I think what it comes down to is, for a long time, it was about finances and commitment to football. I think both programs are starting to make that commitment. William also says that Fomashon graduated from Avon Old Farms. He was in his grade, class of 2019. Hey, awesome. His little brother was at UConn for a while there, too. Yep, he was. He's a hell of a player, man. And he's finally realizing his potential. All right, let's talk some Boston College football here to wrap up the show. Of course, Labor Day night on ABC, they travel down to Tallahassee to take on the winless Florida State Seminoles, who lost in shocking fashion on Saturday in Ireland to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets on a last-second field goal, 24-21. Look, I think for me, when I look at this game, Ryan, can Boston College go down there and win? Yes. A lot of people have said, well, I don't see Florida State starting 0-2. I don't know what you're talking about. You got to stop drinking that New England Kool-Aid. Okay, fair point. Fair point. I'll give you that. But I'm not going to discount this Boston College football team. Now, Kevin and I have said this all offseason, and Kevin's been saying this since O'Brien got here, and I couldn't agree with him more. Their season, so much of their success is going to be on Tommy Castellanos. If he fits into that offense, if he improves as a passer, if he makes plays in the passing game, they're going to run the ball. They've got a stable of backs. You got Kai Robichaux, you got Trayshawn Ward. I know, Day-Day's been hurt lately, but you're going to get Datrell Jones back. They've got a stable of backs. Turbo Richard, they got guys that can run the ball. But for me, it comes down to one thing. It's Castellanos. He's got all the pieces that he needs to be successful. You got a guy that could end up becoming a reliable weapon for you in Kamari Morales at tight end, the UNC transfer. You got Matt Reagan from Lawrence Academy. I think he's poised to have a big year. So they've got talent at tight end. You got talent on the perimeter with Lewis Bond. You got Jerron Bradley. They've got the players. And then on defense, I think that back seven is going to be pretty good, specifically their secondary. And then up front, I mean, you got maybe 2 of the best pass rushers. If not, by the end of the season, they could be the best duo in the ACC in Donovan Ezaraku and Neto Okpala. So for me, they have what they need to go down there and win. It's just a matter of, can this staff coach them up, and do they believe they can go in and win in that environment? Because, Florida State's going to come out pissed off. Of course they are. It's their home opener. They lost in week 0. They're pissed. They have national title aspirations. Yeah, they're going to come out pissed. They should. But Boston College can go down there and win this game if they play well.
Yeah, I think they're going to cover 18.5 points. I think that's insanely generous, especially considering last week. I've never really
considering that DJ Uiagalelei is who we thought he was.
Yeah, and that's the case where he's not a dynamic player that I think can take a program over the top. And I think that BC is talented enough to make his life hell. I don't love that this game is week 1 in Tallahassee. I think that it benefits FSU in the sense that they're going to be pissed off. They were embarrassed last week, because it wouldn't shock me if this were November and Georgia Tech had beaten Florida State. They always lose. Georgia Tech always gets a win like that every season, sometimes over FSU, Clemson, whoever. So I think that Florida State's going to win just based off of last week. I can't see them starting 0-2. But I think this is going to be the case where if BC comes out there and plays and, say, loses, 31-24 or, 27-20, that's going to be huge for their confidence, right? I pity Duquesne the following week, to be honest. But I think that it's going to be a great opportunity for them to be like, hey, remember us? We're BC. We have Bill O'Brien. We're playing on National Spotlight. Also, we have the chance to embarrass him for a second straight week. The motivation's going to be there. And, I'm certainly pulling for him because I think that'd be great for New England college football. I think it'd be great for, probably not great for the ACC, but it is a game that I don't know if they can win, but they're going to keep it close. But if it's close at the end of the game, I like their chances better than Florida State because of the revenge in the returning cast from last year in that close loss. So
I think this game comes down to quarterback play. I think whichever quarterback plays well, specifically throwing the football, I think that team's going to win this game. It's hard for me. I'm going to pick Florida State. I think it's going to be a close game. I would definitely put the money on Boston College as an underdog in this one. I am going to pick FSU, but I think you bring up a good point. Don't be surprised if Boston College wins this football game. It's going to come down to Castellanos. Boston College is built the same way as Georgia Tech in many ways. Now, I think Georgia Tech is better up front along the offensive line, but Boston College brings back Drew Kendall, Ozzie Trapillo, Logan Taylor. And then they've got a lot of guys with experience that can fill in those other 2 spots, whether it's Dwayne Alec or Hess or Conley. They got guys that have played in the program for a long time that can step into those other 2 spots. So for me, these 2 teams are built very similar. I think it comes down to Castellanos. If he plays well, if he's that dual threat guy that he can be, and if he has success throwing the football, they pull off the I don't think it's an upset anymore. They get the win. Yeah. If he's not making plays in the passing game and the game is close, I'm going with Florida State to hang on and pull away. But either way, I think it's going to be a really good game, and I think certainly a Boston College win would be big for New England football. Other thing that's important to note here is Boston College is a tough schedule to start the year. I mean, you go to Florida State, come home for the Kaylee Duquesne Dukes, and then you got a little CSI reference there.
Throwback.
Little throwback. Yeah. But then week 3, they go to Missouri, who's going to be a player in the SEC West. And then they come home on September 21st. They play Michigan State that night in the Red Bandana game. So that's, the schedule lightens up after that, but that's a tough start. And Michigan State, a little bit of a wild card. Jonathan Smith's a good coach, so he'll have them ready to play. But BC needs a good start here. I mean, again, you're not in a place now if you're the Boston College football program where moral victories matter. They don't.
Right.
You either win or you lose. But I think a good showing would help. Ryan, great stuff. We went way over what we normally do, but we had a lot to talk about.
Yes, we're back and excited and jazzed up, and I know that you're probably gassed, so I appreciate you going longer.
Yeah,
so.
I've been going now for the last 2.5 hours.
So
high school college football, but that's what we do here. We love it. It's a labor of love. We wish we could do more. We're trying to keep up, doing our best here, folks. So make sure you follow along. Make sure you check out anyfootballjournal.com if you haven't subscribed for some of the best college and high school football coverage in New England. Please make sure you subscribe for $2.99 a month. You get a lot. It's all football all the time. That's our moniker. It's year-round. We cover the Patriots. We cover D1 college. We cover the high schools. Again, my Connecticut peeps out there that joined us here tonight, if you know anybody that wants to write and cover Connecticut high school football, hit me up in my DMs. We want to get more boots on the ground in Connecticut. We're committed to covering Connecticut high school football to the same level as we are Massachusetts. We're committed to covering Rhode Island. We're committed to covering New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont the same way. So again, if you know anybody out there that wants to write in Connecticut, we are a place for you to check out. Ryan, thanks for taking the time, man. Of course, you'll be out there on Saturday for Eastern Michigan at UMass. Tony Catalina will be down in Kingston for Holy Cross and URI. Those are going to be the two games we're going to be covering for you in person. We're going to be live tweeting the games tomorrow night. We're going to be live tweeting Friday night's game with Maine. And, of course, we'll be live tweeting Boston College on Monday night. That'll be Stone. I mean, it's what he does. So stay tuned for a lot. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up this weekend. Ryan, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you taking the time as always. And we'll do this again next week.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Sarianides. Till next week.